Introduce my friend Suzi O'Connor as our speaker today. Suzi O'Connor was born in Wollongong on the south coast of New South Wales to Hungarian migrants. As a young adult, Suzi studied opera singing at the Sydney Conservatorium of Music and Fine Art at the Sydney College of the Arts before making a significant career shift to finance, with the corporate sectors in Sydney, Melbourne, and Adelaide. Now she made Adelaide as home for her and her husband, Alan. Intrigued by her family's background, particularly her parents' escape from Budapest following the 1956 revolution, Suzi immersed herself in researching this pivotal period of Hungarian history. Her exploration of her roots led her to write her first novel, The Ancestral Ring of Hope, drawing inspiration from her parents' experiences living under a repressive communist regime. Through her writing, Suzi pays homage to her heritage and vividly portrays the struggles and triumphs of those who fought for freedom during turbulent times. So please join me in welcoming Suzi to the podium as she is going to introduce her first novel, The Ancestral Ring of Hope.
Firstly, I'd like to thank Gildy and Kelly for inviting me to speak about my novel, The Ancestral Ring of Hope, and I appreciate your interest in coming here today. I wish to acknowledge that we are meeting on the traditional country of the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains, and I pay respect to elders past, present, and emerging. The Ancestral Ring of Hope is my debut novel. The story is set in Hungary during the 1950s and was inspired by my family history. It's a compelling tale of love, grief, courage, and a resolute quest for freedom. The narrative unfolds in the months following Joseph Stalin's death in 1953, highlighting the hardships faced by Hungarians and the percolating unrest that evolved into a revolution against a brutal communist regime. I focused on the human experience of ordinary people, capturing their hopes and dreams, fears, anxieties, and desperation. In the case of the main protagonist, István, the story delves into his pursuit for freedom for himself and his beloved wife, Natália. As an Australian-born child of Hungarian immigrants, my family history has always intrigued me. While aware that my parents fled Hungary after the revolution of 1956, I never fully understood why they, along with 200,000 other citizens, felt compelled to escape. Regrettably, my father passed away when I was a teenager, and I never discussed that period of his life with him, nor did he ever mention his life in Hungary. In recent years, I quizzed my mother and learned that my father repeatedly spoke out against the communist doctrines that had led to a significant decline in living and working conditions and had been incarcerated and tortured for it. He later joined forces with his fellow Hungarians in an attempt to overthrow their Soviet masters. It's essential to note that prior to the Second World War, Hungary was a free society. Its people were characterised by free thinking, creativity and enterprise, contributing innovations such as the electric locomotive, safety match, carbonated water, and the ballpoint pen. From farming to movies, the economy was diversified across a variety of industries, many of which were privately owned. Innovation and entrepreneurship were deeply ingrained in Hungarian life, offering opportunities for all to prosper. Education, particularly in the arts and sciences, held significant value, fostering highly acclaimed academics and producing Nobel Prize winners in physics, medicine, and chemistry. However, after the Second World War, the Iron Curtain descended over Eastern Europe, dramatically reshaping Hungarian life. The cultural, intellectual, and spiritual fabric of Hungarian society clashed with the doctrines of communist Russia. The post-World War II changes, marked by the violent actions of the Russian Red Army, targeted perceived political enemies and various ethnic groups, leading to land confiscations and redistributions based on collectivist ideology. Communist propaganda permeated every aspect of society, resulting in the suppression of free thinking, creativity, and censorship in education and the media. Private businesses were nationalised, and priests were persecuted as traitors. Trust eroded as family members and friends betrayed each other to the Red Army for self-preservation. Fear gripped the nation, setting the stage for a rebellion. On October 23, 1956, a peaceful demonstration at Bem Square in Budapest, initially organised by the Hungarian Writers' Union in solidarity with Poland's demands for political reforms, provided the platform for other intellectuals to voice their own social and political reforms for Hungary. A list of 16 demands was read out to the assembled crowd, some of which were highly provocative, bordering on treason against the communist regime, an act that would likely lead to imprisonment. The first point called for the immediate evacuation of all Soviet troops, while another demanded complete recognition of freedom of opinion and expression, of freedom of the press and of the radio. To openly criticise the government, and worse still, demand political reform, was extremely dangerous. The crowd was initially shocked by the audacity of the students, and some feared arrest if seen among the agitators. Yet they were equally incredulous to hear their suppressed views and demands for change spoken so boldly in the open, and were nonetheless thrilled. The mob was highly charged by the time the speaker had finished. Cheering and punching their fists in the air, some people began chanting, "Russians go home! Russians go home!" The atmosphere was electric. One of the organisers bellowed above the roar of the crowd that the 16 demands would be broadcast across the airways. A large, fervent crowd followed the organisers to the national radio station, eager to hear the demands reverberate across the city. Some remained at Bem Square, wondering what would happen next. A group of men splintered from the mob and raced across the lawn to the flagpole, pulling the Hungarian flag down to head height. As they held the flag taut, one man cut out the centre communist coat of arms and torched it. Hoisting the transformed flag up the pole, it flapped in the breeze, a testament to a new beginning. And if you have a look on the screen, the top left-hand corner shows the flag minus the communist coat of arms in the centre. The peaceful demonstration quickly escalated into conflict with the authorities when the broadcast at the national radio station failed to transmit the 16 demands. People fought to enter the radio station to determine why the broadcast failed and feared for the safety of their representatives. The secret police, already on the scene, threw tear gas into the crowd, hoping to disperse them. But the enraged mob would not be deterred. They continued to surge forward to gain entry into the radio station. And then, without warning, a lone shot was fired from the roof of the building, marking the beginning of the massacre of innocent men and women. Hungarian soldiers, tasked with restoring order, sided with their citizens rather than their Russian bosses. The People's Army refused to fire on their compatriots. Instead, they distributed weapons and ammunition to the citizens. Anyone who sought a weapon was given one. A peaceful protest turned into an armed insurrection. 16 of the revolutionaries were killed and 60 were wounded on that first night. 6 days later, on October 29, Russia announced the withdrawal of troops from Budapest. Chanting "Victory!", thousands of citizens lined the streets, astonished that they, ordinary working-class people, had prevailed against the might of the Russians. But their euphoria was short-lived. Nikita Khrushchev, first secretary of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, unwilling to show weakness and jeopardise the entire Soviet Union, ordered the Russians to regain control. On November 4, Russian tanks returned in large numbers, filling the streets of Budapest and indiscriminately opened fire. This was no longer a mere police intervention to quell civil unrest. Russia waged war with callous ferocity and phenomenal amounts of weaponry. Despite the efforts of thousands of citizens to retaliate, their resistance proved feeble, with Russia brutally crushing the revolution. Minor skirmishes persisted across Hungary despite Soviet domination. A ceasefire was eventually declared on November 10, 1956. The revolution, lasting 12 days, claimed the lives of 2,500 Hungarians and 720 Soviet troops, with thousands more wounded. Thousands of people were arrested for insurrection. Many were imprisoned, with an estimated 350 recorded executions. Some people merely vanished without a trace. Remaining in Hungary for dissidents became perilous, with a high risk of death. Russia heightened its presence in Hungary with additional troops, quashing notions of further conflict. Hungarians reluctantly accepted defeat and the ongoing presence of their oppressor. However, not my father. He vowed to escape Europe regardless of the risks, determined to secure a new life for his family in an open and free society. Leaving all their possessions behind and with only their clothes on their backs, my parents set out on foot for the Austrian border. Ankle deep in snow, they trudged through back roads, villages and farmland, dodging numerous police checkpoints and border guards. With luck and determination, they successfully crossed into Austria on the 4th day of trekking. Through the assistance of the Red Cross and several countries that welcomed Hungarian refugees, my parents chose a country that was as far from Europe as possible, and they immigrated to Australia in late 1957. My older sister and I were born in our new democratic country. My father's dream was realised. The Soviet Union persisted in Eastern Europe for another 30 years before collapsing in the early 1990s. It's disconcerting to witness Russia's aggression in Hungary echoing itself, paralleling the horror unfolding in Ukraine at the hands of Russia's dictator. The Hungarian Revolution took place 68 years ago, yet it remains vivid in my ageing mother's memory. You can imagine how horrified she was when in 2014 Russia invaded the Crimean Peninsula, which was part of Ukraine, and then annexed it. More recently, Russian tanks rolled into Ukraine in February 2022. Where will it stop? Hungary borders Ukraine, and our extended family awaits nervously for the outcome of the war. Mum reiterates how safe she feels in Australia, so far from Europe's precarious situation. My story serves as a reminder of the fragility of peace and democracy, easily shattered by those seeking power. So, why write a novel? As an avid reader of various genres, particularly historical fiction, I believed that my parents' life during that difficult time in Hungary, culminating in their escape from an oppressive communist regime, was a story worth telling. My intent was to write an historical fiction novel based on my family history, with the goal of reaching a broader readership who equally loved this genre. I extensively researched this historical period, aiming for accuracy in the political situation and the key figures that shaped events. However, it's still a work of fiction, and while I wove it around documented events and people, it may contain some inaccuracies of the period. I over-dramatised and embellished certain scenes and introduced fictional villains and other characters to the storyline to captivate the audience. Now, I'll read a short extract from the novel to give you a sense of the drama. Stepping out cautiously, they gazed around the street, tentatively searching for the source of the clamour. Many other people were milling around too, some huddled together, seemingly feeling safer in small groups, while others gravitating towards the loud rumbling. István and Natália followed the noise in an almost trance-like state, as though they were being led by the Pied Piper. Slowly, the surrounding streets filled with men, women and children, all gravitating towards the noise. Unexpectedly, screams ripped through the air, carried on the wind, high-pitched shrieks above the drone of the thunder. People started running towards the epicentre of the commotion. Natália linked her arm with István's, hugging him tightly, not wanting to lose sight of him as the crowd thickened. Then, as they converged on the corner at the end of their street, their worst fears were realised. A row of Soviet T-34 tanks was crawling along Rákóczi Street, heading straight for their group. The tanks were so large that their bulk consumed the street, crushing anything that dared block their way. Stray dogs ran alongside, barking incessantly. The huge guns at the front of the tanks moved from left to right, firing indiscriminately into buildings and into the crowd, bullets ricocheting off walls. Large chunks of brick flew into the air before crashing to the ground in piles of rubble. The tanks forged ahead, crushing the debris into dust. The screams that burst from the horrified crowd intensified. Some people fell to the ground. It was not clear who was wounded or who was instinctively trying to dodge the bullets. People ran frantically in all directions to escape the attack, colliding with one another in their desperation to flee. Natália froze, mouth agape, transfixed at the scene unfolding not more than 5 feet in front of her. An elderly woman collapsed onto the ground, blood pooling around her head as she hit the pavement, dead eyes staring up at Natália. Part of the woman's throat and skull was missing from where the bullets had torn through her, saving Natália from being hit. A scream caught in Natália's throat. A faint wheezing sound was all that escaped from her lips. István grabbed her upper arm, jerked her around, yelling to run back the way they had come, back towards their apartment. For a moment, Natália just looked at her husband blankly, unable to move. Then, as more shots were fired, small pieces of mortar caught Natália's shoulder, snapping her out of her bewilderment. István started running, dragging Natália behind him. They flew on winged feet, hardly connecting with the ground, with a surreal sense of weightlessness as they fled the attack. Darting into smaller streets, away from the main thoroughfare and the looming tanks, allowed them to slow down a little, knowing they were clear of the firing line. Once they reached their apartment block, István guided Natália down to the communal laundry in the basement, the safest place to hide, should their building suffer an attack. Natália became panic-stricken, sobbing hysterically, never having seen a dead person before. The poor woman, who would tell her family what happened? István sat with Natália for a few minutes, hugging her tightly against his chest, stroking her hair, reassuring her that she was safe. He removed her coat and undid her blouse to examine the wound on her shoulder and was relieved that it was only grazed. A bruise was forming, but no blood had been spilt. Since its publication, I'm thrilled to announce the emergence of a new project, a collaboration with acclaimed music composer John Peterson. Together we have embarked on writing an opera based on the story. John holds a Bachelor of Music degree, Master of Music and a PhD in composition from the University of Sydney. He has taught composition at both the University of Sydney and the University of New South Wales, and his works have been performed and recorded across the country as well as in the US and the UK. Whilst it's still early days, work is progressing on the opera. Last year, I had the privilege of spending 2 weeks holidaying in Budapest. Here are some of my photos capturing the essence of this vibrant, beautiful city, bisected by the majestic Danube River. While steeped in history, with remnants of the revolution still visible in some scarred buildings, Budapest has evolved into a cosmopolitan metropolis. English is widely spoken in the hospitality sector, facilitating navigation through the touristy precincts. Despite being a proud Aussie, I was excited to delve into the culture of my ancestors, attempting to speak my rudimentary Hungarian at every opportunity to immerse myself in the local vibe. While the cuisine reflects multicultural influences, the Hungarian dishes I sampled, though delicious, really couldn't quite match up to Mum's homemade versions. Made from the heart. Finally, I want to express my deep gratitude to my mother for her unwavering support in shaping this narrative. Unlike many others who endured severe hardship and war, my mother courageously revisited her painful past to share the memories of her youth and encouraged me to pursue this project. Without her determination, courage, love and loyalty for my father, it's probable that my parents would not have survived their escape from Hungary after the failed revolution, and I would not be standing before you today. This poignant reality concludes my presentation. Paperbacks of the book are in the foyer for anyone interested, and for any book sold today, I will donate $3 towards fundraising events for Adelaide Rotary. I hope you enjoy the story. Thank you. Thank
you, Suzi, for such a great, compelling and insightful history to share with us. And I'd like to have, we are welcoming all the members for Q&A now.
Oh, no, we don't take questions.
Excellent. Looks like I've got the microphone.
We don't take questions. No, I'm sorry.
No, thank you for that. I mean, and that whole episode, of course, was repeated across a lot of Eastern Europe. And I certainly remember going to Budapest in 1984 when it was behind the Iron Curtain and seeing the shrapnel marks and so on still on the walls. So the idea that it was street by street, right in the centre of the city, was completely obvious. So with that as a sort of a historical memory, if you like, for the Hungarians, what's going on today with Orbán? I mean, he's Putin's man in NATO. He's Putin's man in the EU.
I don't really want to go into politics today. Suffice it to say, it's hugely disappointing, isn't it? And it's very concerning that there's no speaking out against Putin at all. If anything, they seem to be quite solid allies.
Yeah.
So I don't really want to comment on that. Everyone's got an opinion, but I just find it very concerning and distressing, absolutely. And actually, when I was in Budapest last year, just spoke to a few, retailers, and a lot of people we spoke to didn't really agree with the politics of the day. So I don't really wish to comment too much further than that, other than to say it is very concerning.
So you have your mother kind of like giving you some of her memories of the kind of like episode. Is there a large, so obviously they were not the only one that basically moved from Hungary to Australia at a time. So it's like what kind of like, is there much of a community kind of like in Australia kind of from that time, and kind of like how is it in the wider community? Did you engage with them as well about the kind of episode? Did you talk with others? Did you basically bring in kind of like memories from other people into that, or is it essentially driven predominantly as a family?
Well, we settled in New South Wales, on the south coast of New South Wales, and there was a bit of a Hungarian community there, like there is here in Adelaide as well. Not particularly huge, but there was a community. But having said that, my parents came to this country with one suitcase and no language. And so my older sister, when she started going to school, was encouraged to speak English at home so my parents could learn English. And so whilst we didn't turn our back, or they didn't turn their back on their heritage and culture, and yes, they were a little bit involved in the local Hungarian community where they lived, mainly because, one, they didn't speak English anyway for the first couple of years particularly well, and secondly, it's good to have some sort of a community that you can work with and be involved with. But certainly as we grew older, that seemed to disappear. They just integrated into the community, and my mother was very keen particularly to make sure that she could speak excellent English. And if anything, Mum used to work in David Jones for many years in the fashion area, and was always interested in fashion and things like that. So at the end of the day, they very much integrated into the community. Yeah.
Thank you, Suzi. It's a really strong reminder that this has all happened in our lifetime, and it's very real for people who are in Australia. I just want to ask a very simple question. I just love the imagery on your book cover. I'm just wondering where you got that photo from.
I think it's Starter Shop. I'm self-published, but I did use a local Adelaide firm to actually help me with the production of the book, and they designed the cover for me. Yeah, it's a very powerful image, isn't it? Yes, it's marvellous. It does encapsulate the story, yes. Thanks, Chris. Well, this is interesting because I've only just recently retired, and so I really started this some years ago. Probably 2 years of researching on and off, on weekends. I used to work full time, so it was a part-time occupation. And my husband said to me at one point, "Are you actually ever going to write anything, or are you just going to spend your life researching, And I really didn't know where to begin, and then all of a sudden something hit me and I started writing. So really the writing took about 6 years part-time, and then I took long service leave from work, and I decided to just use that time to finish the book because I was close to finishing. And then not long after that I left work, and I spent probably 18 months not being from the publishing industry. It was a whole new ball game for me. And so I at first tried to find a publisher, and I went through that process, and I had it professionally edited, and got it to a point where I thought it was worthy of publication. And I suppose the only real reason I did publish the book, because I didn't really intend to make a fortune from it. I really wanted to write the book for my mother, but also when my friend John Peterson, who's a composer, said he was always looking for the right script or the right story to write an opera, I thought, well, I better get it published because then it puts more credence to the opera. So that's why we're working on that project now, which is really exciting. So.
Hi, you said you know a little bit of Hungarian?
Igen.
Servus. Opal, Magyar. My father,
again,
Hungarian, is Hungarian.
Is it? Yeah.
He came over around the same time. So one of the things, and with his parents, one of the things that I find really hard as a Hungarian is to find any information from relatives that were left behind. In fact, I have no real linkage at all. Have you found that difficult yourself in your research?
Well, I've got a whole other story around that, in the sense that my father my father was considerably older than my mother, and after the Second World War, he actually was trying to flee Europe altogether, and just couldn't. He got stuck at the Hungarian border, and he just couldn't get out. And he actually changed his surname. And so when my mother married him, it was not his real surname. And so we don't actually know who he is and where his family are. And we're now actually trying to track down birth certificates, things like that. My sister and I have done the Ancestry.com DNA tests and my heritage tests and stuff, trying to track down, because we know nothing about his side of the family at all. And when they came to Australia, they completely lost contact. My mother remains in contact with her side of the family, but the father's side was completely... And actually, I think they said they got a letter early in the piece to say, don't write to us anymore, it's too dangerous. So we have no idea. So yeah, we're trying to track down my father's family just out of interest, because we have no idea who he really was. And my mother even acknowledges now she's not sure. She knows who he really was. But köszönöm szépen. Köszönöm szépen.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. The book, is it a love story?
Yes.
And who are the two people in love? Who are the people who?
Well, it's based on my parents.
So it's...
But I've changed names, but it's based on my parents.
And their love story.
Yes, correct. Yes. But it's interwoven around pre the revolution, and then their escape. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Suzi. Such a beautiful speech for us today. And there is a gift from us. Aww. It's the two books. One is 100 Knocked Out. Another one is RCA 100 Centenary book for you.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you very much.
And as well, today's event, all the monies raised today go directed to Rotary communities and projects. With your presentations, it will make happen.
Oh, great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So please give a round of applause to our guest speaker.